Welcome back, everybody, to the Northwoods Kindred Podcast. I'm Bodvar, the chieftain and Gothi of the Northwoods Kindred. Today we have a really interesting show. I'm going to talk about Asatru, just Asatru in general. You know, that's what we talk about on this podcast. It's all about Asatru anyway, but I want to kind of get down in the nitty-gritty about modern Asatru, the practice as a whole, including the community, what's wrong with it, and what's right with it, and see what we can do to make it better moving forward into the future. I think pretty much everyone's aware that modern Asatru, as we practice it now, started in the early 70s in Iceland. Well, it actually began way earlier than that, but it became officially recognized in Iceland around 1971-72 time frame, when the resurgence was happening there, led by Sveinborn Bwentensen. It is now known as something, it's Asatru Felgith. I can never really say it right, I don't have a tongue for it, but it essentially means Asatru Fellowship. If you do a converter on Google or whatever, it says Asatru Company, whatever, but it's a group of Asatruar in Iceland, and they call it whatever they call it, and that's really not the point. But they did coin the phrase of Asatru. Now, at the same time this was happening, we had Asatru pieces here in America growing and kind of rediscovering their religion and adopting other folk ways and kind of mishmashing them together, strung together with whatever little bits and pieces of the lore and their religion they could put together as they learned how to do this sort of thing. And I think for the most part, most of them probably began with a pretty pure intent and a call back. They probably felt about the same call that you and I feel when we first came back and decided that we were going to make this our way, or started learning about it, that excitement. I'm sure that was the part of it. But somewhere along the way, everybody just kind of, they just kind of flipped the script and diverged enough to where differences started to happen. The thought process about what it should be, what it was, what it's going to become, who should control it, those sort of things kind of took on a mind of their own. And nobody's ever really gotten a handle on it. Nobody ever really brought it together, which is part of the reason we don't have any large Asatru organizations today. Even those that look pretty large aren't really that big. So, starting with Sveinborn in Iceland, there was a little kind of a growth period that happened. Sveinborn's, it got up to like 150 members or something, I think, when Sveinborn was alive. It's way bigger than that now. But once he died, they went through like a little transitional phase where they would get another ulterior Gothi, and they would have to kind of reinvent how they were going to do things. I don't think they changed it very much, but one thing they did do is the next guy that took over after Sveinborn, I believe, was Jormungandr Ingi, and he kind of took a little trip. I know he came here to the U.S. because I have pictures of some of my kinsmen with him, but he might have traveled around the other places too. And ultimately, his decision when he went back to Iceland was, let's keep it to Icelanders. Let's just kind of close it off. And kind of do our own thing, because we didn't like, when I say we, I'm speaking for Jormungandr, of course. He or they, the Icelanders, didn't seem to like the way that it was going. And that was partially because of people like the AFA and the organizations here in America that weren't doing really good things with the religion, the way that they were trying to redo it. And then you have Elsie Christensen from Denmark coming over here, and some people call her like the folk mother. We'll get into that later. So she's kind of a disaster too, at least as far as a disaster to the religion, coming out of the Nazi party from Denmark, I believe, and then all the stuff that comes with that, and then coming here and trying to contort Asatru to fit her twisted version, and of course taking people down that road with her. I'll probably get some hate from some people about trashing the folk mother of the other side of Asatru, but y'all can piss straight up a rope. That's not why we're here. I'm not here to just slander dead people, but I do want to kind of give you that little bit of a background. That's kind of where it started. So you could tell that, like, from the point that Asatru was accepted in Iceland as a national religion, or as a formal, government accepted religion, from that moment on, we have diverged. And, there's a lot of people who kind of, even here in America, kind of stuck with the the Icelandic sort of a pattern, and did the best they could with limited resources and limited support. And then the other ones kind of mishmash, went here and there. The AFA came and went. It became a different AFA, and I don't want to really I don't want to go down that road too much, because it's not about them. It's about us. It's about us, modern Asatru, not that old stuff. But it's really hard to tell who you are if you can't tell where you came from. And unfortunately, that's a part of the history of Asatru in America. Some people don't want to admit it, but it is. Now, there were other sides to Asatru in America at that time, too. So you had a minor contingent at best of, I guess, witches and warlocks that practiced that other version of a folk way, and that were just yearning for something that called to them from their people or from their history. And some of those jumped ship, came to the Asatru side, but they brought a lot of that with them. So from its inception, Asatru in America has been kind of intertwined with Wicca, Druidism, and other folk ways, because we've had to borrow back and forth in order to make the connection. The Icelanders kind of went off and did their own thing, and we've borrowed from them over the years as well, as much as we could. But they had a little bit of a closer tie to the history, since in reality Iceland was the last country to convert fully to Christianity, and they did that under protest. And I think probably at least half of Iceland was probably under protest when they did finally convert and accept Christianity as the national way, and put our pagan roots on the back burner. So they were the last to convert, but they're also, for all intents and purposes, the first to go back. So they have a connection that they share with us. They share with us by way of the sagas of the sagas of Icelanders, both the condensed version and the complete sagas with 49 tales, which is a national treasure in Iceland. And I also have a copy that I'm working my way through, which is a lot of just amazing works. Now, how true they are, how factual, that's all up for debate. But it is good stories, and whether they're 100% factual or not, they do echo the sentiment, the feeling, the air of the people of that time period. So it is a really good read. So we know that we came out of Iceland, and we progressed on our path, from that. We all kind of came from the same wellspring. But it was kind of interesting, because as it was popping up in Iceland and Swedenborg was taking the helm, it was popping up in Europe and even in Germany, America, Australia, Canada. It was coming up in a lot of different places. I don't know if one sparked the other, or if there was just this period in history, this 5 to 10 year period where the gods just woke up and said, it was a nice nap, but it's time to get back to work. And then started just gathering folk. And we can trash those old timers as much as we want. I tend to not go down that road, even though I know a lot of them, and I know them personally, and I don't care for them. But I don't see value in just sitting here 30, 40, 50 years later and trashing the guys who started it because their intent was sour. Let's just take what we have, build on it, and run with it. So let's move into this. And I'm just going to do this part, and I'm just going to call this the way home, because this is really the transitional phase. And we're kind of in a serious transitional phase now, because throughout the history of Asatru in America, there was never a really large group of practitioners. It's never really gained any kind of serious mass. Anytime it does, infighting happens. Groups disband. People become enemies. It's always been sort of a self-destruct mode to get any kind of size or any kind of organization, and even more so nowadays, because if you mention the word organization, everybody screams dogma and takes off running in the opposite direction. So because of that, we're unlikely to get a really good organized structure anytime soon, but we're working towards it, and that's just part of the process. I think it takes a long time. How long did it take before Christianity was the dominant force in Europe? Hundreds of years. We've only been at it for 40 or 50, so we have to kind of take that with a grain of salt. Now, as people are kind of waking up to not only Asatru and the pagan religions, but they're waking up a little bit more to their own personal spirituality, their connection to nature, their connection to the world around them, and the connection to each other. I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of people, we just tend to be, in some cases, a little bit more compassionate, even if in a lot of cases that compassion is just a front. It's a bargaining chip. It's like, because of the social pressure, people act very compassionate. I don't think the modern kind of a spiritual person, the modern equivalent to what would be like the hippies in the 60s or the 70s, that modern person, I don't think doesn't feel like it, has the same purity for all that they did during that time frame. But I didn't live in that time frame. I mean, I was born in the 70s, but I didn't live with those people. So it might have had an air of faults with it then too. Only, if you were a hippie during the 60s and 70s, let me know. Did it have a little fakeness to it? Because nowadays it seems fake. It seems like we're all cool and peace loving and it's all kumbaya until you disagree, and then it's on. And that doesn't seem like the way it used to be. Although there were, of course, radical factions, I think that for the most part, people just kind of wanted to just, love one another and be kind to each other. And but that's just on the outside looking in, because like I said, I wasn't there. So we have that growing now, but I think it's kind of in its infancy. We're still learning how to be that. We're coming out of our 80s and 90s and 2000s where it was, maybe not violent, but it was really a me against him sort of a mentality. And then, with our millennials here, like my sons are, some of my sons are millennials and they grew up. You might not think so, but I mean, their entire life, dad was at war. They may not have lived, they were born after 9/11, but they got to relive it every year in school. They got to relive this trauma that how bad would it be after World War II to see in school every year for the next 20 or 30 years is just pictures of Nazi death camps. And, we didn't do that. That didn't happen to our parents. That didn't happen to us after Vietnam. It didn't happen to any generation that I'm aware of, except the millennials. So they got a little bit of buried anger there, and they don't even know why. So now, in a search, I think, to kind of self-heal, they're coming back to the faith. They're coming back to Asatru, and or back to pagan religions, Asatru being one of them. And then however else you identify, whether you identify as Norse pagan or even Wiccans, Druids. I don't necessarily agree with the Vanatru, Rockatru thing. I think if you identify as a Vanatru or a Rockatru, in my book you're still Asatru. You just don't quite understand what that means. So maybe we could put some of that to bed tonight and talk about what is Asatru, and from the eyes of someone who's been at it a while. And you don't have to agree with me. I certainly wouldn't like any hate over it just because I have an opinion, but I feel like that's kind of par for the course in this day and age, is that if you have an opinion, expect that somebody's not only going to be opposed to it, but they will be violently opposed to it. And that's just something we're trying to learn to live with. And eventually we'll work it out of our system. But right now we have a long way to go. So we're on our way home right now, and there's a serious decline in Christianity across America, but also in the world. And a lot of it in America is spawned by political left to right, mumbo jumbo, and all this Bible stuff. It's like, oh, the Bible says, and oh, the Bible says, and you can't do this, and you can't do that, and you're a sinner, and you're wrong, and you're going to go to hell, and all blah, blah, blah. And then you have these radical weirdos all over TikTok and stuff. I'm sure you've seen some of them, and I'll get into that in a minute too. So I think all of that is really contributing to the decline of people even wanting to identify as Christians. Now, I went through the internet and I grabbed a whole bunch of percentages and all this kind of stuff, but it didn't really make a lot of good sense to us, because it's like, this is how Christianity went down, and how Islam has gone down or gained in some countries, how Catholicism specifically, or evangelical Christians, or born against, how all these little things have all been kind of nickel and dime going away in America. But it's only by percentages here and there. But, if you got a 1% here and 2% there and 3% there, that adds up really fast. Because in a lot of those studies that I looked at, Asatru or Norse paganism, or even eclectic paganism or heathenry and paganism in general, didn't even make the list. They just kind of fell in the other category. But that other category, to include agnostics, there's some that just say no religion or no preference, or just general generally no preference or whatever, so I don't really include them. But all the other religions, including agnostics and stuff, their percentages are, I think they have doubled since 2017, which seems like a long time, but really it's the blink of an eye in the history of, hell, even this country. So it's really not that bad, but the trend, it's trending upward, and that's really what's important, because as it grows, it's going to gain momentum. And then, of course, that means TV shows, movies, comic books, those sort of things, as poorly done as some of them are, they're still bringing people in. And some of those people will go by the wayside. Some of those people that are here now in Asatru are the same people who were getting Molan Leb tattooed on them after 300, and then the Vikings came out and they're getting, Till Valhalla tattooed on them. And, those slogans, those little one-liners, that's fine. All that stuff is going to end up going by the wayside eventually, and what's going to be left are the true believers and those that actually put in the work and realize that that stuff is entertaining. I mean, the truth is, I'd rather watch a bad show about Vikings than a good show about Christians. So it is entertaining, and it is worth watching. I will admit that I've never seen that Loki show. I think it was on Netflix or something. I haven't seen that. But I have a strong feeling that that they're playing him as some sort of a kind of an anti-hero, and that's contributing to a lot of the people venerating Loki that are coming in. But even then, I've seen some of them sort of steer a little bit away from it as they educate themselves more and learn a little bit more about who he is, and decide that, I mean, he's necessary. Everybody can agree on that, I think, but maybe not the one you want to be venerating all the time. But I think that the movies and the comic books and stuff like that kind of contribute to that anti-hero, that little cool outlier sort of a mindset. But remember, if you watch TV and they can make anybody a hero. I mean, look at Dexter. I mean, Dexter was literally a serial killer, and it ran for I don't know how many, 6 or 7 seasons. Everybody loved Dexter, and he was literally a serial killer. So they can make anybody look cool on TV. But I don't know of any serial killers in real life that had such fanfare as Dexter. So, but I think all of that is, the sensationalism of the Norse pantheon and, and Norse paganry in general, coupled with the closed-mindedness of the Christians, and sometimes violently closed-minded. And I'm going to actually come back to that in a minute, because there's some relationship between that and us that I think you might be interested in here, and you might agree with me, and you might not. And by the way, like, if you disagree with me in here, absolutely put it in the comments. Put that stuff down there. Shoot me an email. northwoodskndr@gmail.com, and I'm certainly happy to debate it. The best place to do that is go to my Discord. It's a perfectly safe place for everybody. The link is in my link tree. It's down below, whether you're listening to this on Spotify, Anchor, or watching the video on YouTube. There'll be a link to my link tree. Go there, jump to my Discord. Super safe place to have a conversation if you're a big boy and you can have a conversation. If you are a child about it, and you go on the offense because somebody said something that threatens, your decision-making process or whatever. But if you can talk about it like an adult and articulate your ideas and not just slander, call names, and then throw out random quotes like Til Valhalla, you'll have a good time there. We got a really good crew, very knowledgeable, and more than willing to always share what they know. Don't be shy about popping into my website, www.survivalhardwarellc.com. I got a whole bunch of handmade stuff that myself and my wife have made. I got a whole big stack of these Fire Striker hammers coming up real soon. There's a few free downloads there. The Gods and Goddesses of Asatru. There is how to conduct a bloat, some frequently asked questions. These little flyers you can download, print off. We'll be adding more stuff to that soon. We'll probably start revamping the website and changing it around. But if you want to support us, there's only 2 ways to do it. You can go to our website and buy some of the products that we build, or occasionally import at a way fair price compared to some of the other people. But you can do that, or you can join our Patreon, which doesn't give you a whole lot more content than what you're getting for free all over across our apps. But it is there, so for some people, especially since I kind of work with some of these people, and they help us out on Patreon, and I appreciate that very, very much, because that's what helps me be able to afford hosting and the equipment that I'm, recording this on, and even the paint, like even that's not cheap to get that paint color mixed up and painted on the wall behind me in order to do the green screen so I can put whatever cool pictures back there. I haven't seen it yet, so I don't know, but I'm sure it'll be fantastic. And so that is because of our patrons. That's what supports us. And of course, if you're watching the video, we have their names kind of go up on the video when I'm talking here. And that's that's just something we do. And also we give our pre-gathering planning. We give our post-gathering checklist. We give exclusive little pictures and videos, and then a recipe of the month, kind of the after action for the gathering, and then any other little small things like the other day we did a Gods and Goddesses of Asatru, and we gave away a free flyer. We just gave it to our patrons a few days early before the video even came out, so that they could have it in their hand when they watched the video. So it's little things like that, little pieces to go a little bit above and beyond just to help them out because they want to help us out. And we appreciate that greatly because we don't have any monetized platform. I mean, we're monetized on YouTube, but that doesn't amount to anything. And we don't have a school or some scam or some other thing going on. All we have is our shop with our handmade goods and our Patreon right now. And so if you feel the need, like you want to support this project or our YouTube project or, our little shorts on TikTok and that kind of stuff, those are the two places to do it. My preference would be swing into the website. If you find something you like, then buy it. We also have a tip jar there. So if you want to tip your maker or whatever, that's cool too. Not trying to turn this into an infomercial, just want to let you know because I get a lot of people ask how they can help, and that's how you can help. Just that right there. So now that the Christianity's declined and people are flocking back to the folk, now we have this problem where they don't know where to go. So maybe Marvel brought them in, maybe the Northmen brought them in, maybe the Loki TV show, maybe Ragnarok on Netflix, which I actually really enjoyed that show. I thought it was really well done. So they get here and they're like, I feel like I need to be a Norse pagan. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. So they end up on TikTok or YouTube. And while I am on both of those platforms, I do understand that they are not particularly stellar learning environments. But that's where people go. And then they end up reading the conversations, falling in line, and they're going to fall in line with a select little group of Asatru. Now, if you're a Norse pagan, and however you want to identify as it, there's select groups or subgroups within Norse paganism. So we'll cover some of those real quick. The first, and I'm not going to make too much difference between them, but there's the folkish and the vokish. Now, I don't know I guess the vokists are the more militant, I guess, the mustachio regime style people, whereas the folkists are more of the mindset that this is a Northern European folk religion that only really belongs to people who descended from Northern Europeans. Now, they'll get some it's really funny, it's strange, because when you really start digging deep and watching it, because even they get some hate from the folkish in the Scandinavian countries. So you'll get some hate from Norway and Denmark and Iceland, but it's not as, I haven't been there, so I don't live in that environment. I haven't been there recently. So the people that I know that are there are all amazing, but they tell me that there is sort of a folkish band that are like, we get our culture in our mother's milk and that kind of, we don't have to read, we live it, which is, fairly ignorant comment, but we won't go there. So they're sort of folkish on their side, and even the folkish here don't measure up, even if they came from there. So it's a real mess. Like when you start going down the road of exclusion, and there's really no safe place to be. You're just going to exclude yourself down to you're the only one that measures up, and that's kind of a crappy way to go. So the vokists, we'll just throw them out with the bathwater. We don't really need them. We don't need those that believe that it's only for this or that. But the folkish is kind of sketchy because, and I'm not a folkish, I don't identify that way, but I do understand in some respects the mindset that would bring people to that side. And it's the same mindset that the Native Americans would have when they say this is our native cultural religion of our people. You colonizers can't just come in here and start wearing headdresses and sitting in sweat lodges and smoking peyote. You can't just take over our stuff like this is ours, and you can't take it. And that's really, I think, the mindset of the focused, is that they're, I don't know what they think is going to happen. Like somebody's going to take it and change it, which I suppose everything evolves in time. But when they start going down the road, the real thing, because I don't mind. Like if you want to have a kindred and you want to have just people with native European look, like it's fine. Keep to yourself, and don't go to any public groups because you're not going to be welcome there. But if that's your goal, I mean, that's who you are. It doesn't affect me. It doesn't affect us out here. Be who you are somewhere else. Just stay out of our circles. If we don't cross paths, or if we just kind of just cross paths and don't worry about it. And I know some of you guys are steaming. You're blowing your lid right now because you're like, have them all stanza 127. When a wrong is done to you, call it out, and blah, 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 blah. And I understand that too. But really, that really depends on the translation, for one. And for two, a group of people deciding to separate themselves from the normals of society and live by their own weird, twisted standard of rules is not wronging me. It only wrongs me when that starts getting out into the mainstream. And we're going to get there, believe me. So stay with me here. Don't just throw your phone down and run away, because I'm on your side here, believe me. But you got to understand both sides of the argument. If you can't argue both sides of the argument, you really don't understand either one of them. So I do understand where they come from. I just don't agree with it, if that makes sense. I don't agree that it's only for Native Europeans. And I say that specifically because we don't know. Most of us don't know where we came from. We have a lot. I mean, I have some bits and pieces. I know that some of my family came from Norway, and some from Germany, and some from England, and bits and pieces. And I have a little bit of family history. But ultimately, I don't know the bits and pieces of every drop of blood that's in my veins. And most people don't. And if you take an ancestry test, which I've never done, I haven't needed to. I don't need that sort of validation. But if you take an ancestry test, even that doesn't really tell you, because they don't really know that this is Scandinavian blood, or this is Viking blood, or this is Icelandic blood. Well, Iceland might be a little bit different, but because it's such a small community, it's such a small thing, that their blood is probably a little bit more closer to what it was during that period in history. But it's still not going to be 100%, because what it was in that period of history was a bunch of people who defected from other Scandinavian countries to settle in Iceland in the first place. So really, it's not even pure in that respect, nor is Greenland, other than the natives that were there, like the Inuit. So the focused kind of side of it all starts to crumble and fall apart when you start going down that road of, hey, everybody came from somewhere, and we don't know exactly, or at least I refuse to believe what they say exactly is the cradle of civilization. I'm not sure where this species started, but I'm assuming that it started as most Bible myths and pagan myths say, with the creation of the first two, Ask and Embla, Adam and Eve, or whatever other groups call them. So I'm pretty sure that we were some sort of a science experiment, because if you look at the evolution of other animals on this planet, we're the only one that jumped so far so fast, to the point of technology and language and culture and structure and art and music. None of the other animals, there is no other animals on the planet, even something really smart like a chimp, doesn't even compare to the level of advancement that we've gained. There must be some form of divine intervention, and we can go down the road of, there's a bunch of theories on that. But my point is that it started somewhere, and we all came from somewhere. And if we started with some sort of divine intervention, did they intervene on every continent, in every country, and create this big separate entity? Or did they intervene at once to the human race and create what we have today? I think that's probably more likely the case. So, focus. And then we have tribalists. And I would probably consider myself a tribalist. And I understand that other people will have a different definition for it. So I will define what I would consider a tribalist. And I'll define that because it's important. Because if you have another definition in your head, I don't want you to use that definition. I want you to use my definition because my definition is how I define us, because there is no other name for it. I guess I could make something up. Lots of people make stuff up. But I'm trying to stick with some of the core beliefs that are already in existence, so we have some sort of a roadmap that we can go by. So a tribalist to me is someone whose loyalty is to their tribe. Now, for a long time, my tribe was the Gallahorn kindred and my family. And when we moved up here and we built the Northwoods kindred, my tribe was extended from my family and Gallahorn kindred to the Northwoods kindred. Now, the criteria to get into the Northwoods kindred has nothing to do with race, identity, sexual identity. It has nothing to do with any of that kind of stuff. So it's more universalist. The real criteria to get into the Northwoods kindred is, for one, you got to be here. Like we meet here at least once a month, sometimes twice because we do crafts and stuff because we're a Heimdall kindred. But you have to be here. You got to be local. You can't just kind of be breezing through town once or anything like that. Another criteria is we have to meet. We have to get to know you. We invite you to a few gatherings. We let you sit a few out. See if you freak out over that. See if you throw a tantrum. Invite you to a few. Let you sit out. Invite you to a few. So and kind of go like that. And it gives us time to kind of feel you. And what it gives us a chance to kind of feel you out and decide, how your personality clicks with our personalities and that sort of a thing. And then in time, then we invite them to be a prospective member, which means an indefinite amount of time where you're automatically invited to every gathering, including, since our gatherings are kind of a 3-day deal, that would be from Friday after work until Sunday morning is generally what our gatherings do. And the majority of the stuff is done on Saturday, and our meetings are done on Friday. So you're automatically invited to that gathering, to that situation without having to get an invite. You have the calendar, you know when it is, you know how to act, how to do that kind of stuff. And then this is the point where we become family. And if we don't become family, then we'll kindly say goodbye. So that was really how it is. But any other criteria that any of those other groups might have doesn't necessarily sit with us. But at the same time, we're also not making sure that we can go out and grab somebody by the ponytail and drag them over here so that we have that level of diversity either. We don't have diversity quotas at the same time. People contact us, we meet with them. If we click, we move on to the next step. If we don't, we say goodbye. And sometimes they don't even want to meet. They just want to panic in the first place and be like, I have a right to go. And it's like, well, we're a tribe. We meet at my home and you ain't got a right to shit. So go read your Havamal and build something yourself. So that's kind of where that goes. So that's kind of my definition of tribalist. Yeah, we're loyal to our tribe. And then the criteria to get into the tribe is generally pretty specific, but not separatist. That's best way I can say it. The other ones we have the universalists, who essentially everybody, whenever, all the time. We have a local group here. I won't call them out, but they just kind of meet in the park or meet in some place and whatever, and anybody's welcome to come in, and they can have 7 people or they can have 20. They call themselves a kindred, but I don't really know if that's the right word for it. And then they're, of course, universalists, and I don't see anything wrong with the universalist aspect of it. I think everybody has a right to practice however they want. I think that there's a kindred. To be a kindred, it requires some sort of a organization. So we have focus. We'll just throw those guys by the wayside for now. Tribalist, universalist, and then we have eclectic, which is in most cases they're sort of universalists too, but they take it to the next level, and they're universalists when it comes to the pantheon as well. So they're like, raise a horn to Freya and raise a horn to Cyrano or whatever, raise a horn to Zeus, and we don't do that here either. That's one of our criteria to get into our tribe, is that you are dedicated to the Norse pantheon exclusively. We're not going to be, flinging up horns to Zeus and stuff like that. We stick very strictly to the Norse pantheon, and even so, the Scandinavian variant of it, not so much Wotan and Donar, because if you really dig down into the gods, it's more than just a name. There are subtle differences between Wotan and Odin, between Thor and Donar, and other things. So there's subtle differences, and we tend to revolve personally around around the Scandinavian variant of the Nordic pantheon. So that's where we sit. And we don't get very eclectic. That's not someone who would be sticking around here very long. They just wouldn't fit well. So when people, now that there's a rise in like the heathen folkways, when people enter into it, they don't know a lot. They might know whatever brought them in, which would be, maybe it was a storybook, maybe it was a friend, maybe they found a hammer and decided to look into what that was. And maybe they found the runes or some other sort of a divination type practice, like they wanted to get into shamanism or seed worker or something like that. And, they heard about it, read about it, called to them. Maybe they migrated here from a different path. They just sort of their path evolved into what it became, and that led them here. So that's always a really good way that, we get a lot of people too. And I like those people that migrate here from another path, because it tells me two things. One, they took the time to learn who they are, learn the path, and then kind of shop around a little and find the one that fit them the best. And I think that if you shopped around, if you experimented with Druidism and Wicca and various other pagan paths, and you ended up here at Norse paganism because it called to you, that is all the folkism that I need. Because if it called to your spirit, to your soul, there's a good chance that you're connected to it in history, and it doesn't matter what the packaging is. So I really like that, and I like it when people are like, oh, I was a Druid, and then I was a Wicca, and then I'm Norse pagan, and I really feel comfortable here. I hear some of that on my Discord. I like that, because it's like, what can you bring? You were a Wicca. What was your kind of your thing? Oh, I'm really into herbs, and yes, like I love that. So let's learn. Let's talk about some herbs and some potions and stuff. And so it's really good, because they had a different experience, whereas my experience started with Asatru. And I know I just contradicted myself. Like, they shopped around, but I didn't. But I left the Catholic Church to come here. And while I was kind of eclectic spiritually, I was kind of looking at all kinds of different things. Ultimately, what led me here was I found the runes, and I found a passion for them, and they led me down the other roads. As Odin says, one word led me to another word, one deed to another deed. And one of those deeds is ritual and building my kindred the way I did. So the individual spirituality of people is what brought them here, but one of the things that we have to contend with is that individual spirituality, sometimes it's a nonconformist mindset, and I don't think we're ever going to metastasize with it. We're never going to solidify as a community if we can't agree on some basic principles. And I'm not saying that I'm here to write them. I'm just saying that we should get along better, and we should be more tolerant of each other, because we don't really know where each other came from. And in a lot of cases, we will, and I say we, but I'm really talking about like the Asatru or the pagan or not, Norse pagan specifically community online. So YouTube's not too bad. I don't, it's a couple of crappy comments and then you delete them. But there's a lot of interaction on TikTok that, and I'm not really involved too much with Twitter, so I don't know how that one works. But there's an interaction on TikTok that's kind of unmatched on anything else. I don't know. They put together something that makes it really easy to have conflict or to build friendships, different than any of the other social medias, even better even than Facebook. And but what we see somebody do something, say something, wear something, and automatically everybody draws a line in the sand. And then it's like, you got like a crew of these guys, and they're always ganging up on this crew, and this crew over here, and they're always ganging up on that crew, and they're almost just looking for something. And then every once in a while, this fresh blood comes in, and they drop a video, and they're like, I'm a new pagan, and I want to do this, and I bought this book. And everybody's like, oh, that book's racist. You need to go to hell. You need to burn it. You suck. You're a racist. You're a Nazi. And then everybody else is like, what? How did that happen? So we don't have a lot of tolerance or patience for our own people. We have to try to remember that on those apps, we have militant Christians, like, we're going to hunt down the witches, and we're going to hunt down the pagans, and we're going to burn their books, and we're going to burn them at the cross or whatever. Like, I don't know, these people, they all sound kind of ballless to me anyway. It's all just kind of air to get likes and follows, and so we have to contend with this. And this isn't anything that our predecessors had to contend with. I'm fortunate that when I came into this, we didn't have this. Like, we maybe had a bulletin board like in the mid 90s or the late 90s, but nothing like we have now. There was none of this kind of stuff. We actually had to go meet people in person. You actually had to be true to your word. People were going to hold you to your promises. And, in a lot of cases, you talk shit, you get hit. People weren't too shy about, just kind of throwing down. But it wasn't instant. It wasn't like, oh, that hammer right there comes from the German blah, 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 and you're a Nazi for wearing it. And it's like, dude, I mean, I just bought this thing at a street stand and, at the mall. Like, I just liked it. I didn't know where it came from. But people, the thing is, the main point that I'm just kind of hitting around is that people do things out of ignorance, and then they're immediately branded and thrown into one ballpark or another. So if this kid buys this book, and this book comes from a racist printing company, and that printing company, everybody knows it except this kid. Now they got this book. They're kind of proud of it. They're like, yeah, I'm starting my journey in Norse paganism. I bought this book. All of a sudden, everybody's like, you're a racist, you're a racist, you're a racist. And they're like, I don't understand any of this. So they go to the people who don't call them a racist, because everybody's calling them this stuff, a homophobe and a transphobe, all this kind of stuff. So they're going to go to the people who aren't calling them names. And who's that? That's the racists. That's the AFA. That's those people. They're the ones that are not calling people that because they identify with it. So then the guy can, the new people can go in and they can pay their particular measure of gold. They can finance these operations. So you people that say that just hunt down every little indication that somebody's a racist or somebody is not the best thing for this path, and you immediately go on the attack, what you're doing is you're driving these new people into the arms of the enemy. And that right there is why the AFA has 4 Hoffs in this country and we have none. It's because we keep driving people to them. They are going to run away from the scorn and scoffing until they get to a place where they're not made fun of and trashed for really for ignorance in a lot of cases. You keep pushing them, that's where they're going to end up. And all that does is build up those churches. Those churches don't engage with you. Those groups don't engage with you at all. But it seems like a lot of groups nowadays, all they do is hunt down and engage with those types. And which isn't a bad thing. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, if you find those people, like, call them out, go to blows, like, do your thing. But you can't do that to every new person that comes around and just doesn't know. Even I make mistakes, and I'll give you a really good example is that only a couple of podcasts ago, I went through about 50 books of mine. And I most recently went to Amazon and ordered these little study Havamals. Turns out that publishing company that made these things that I recommended, the Hugen and Munin Publishing Company, people have been coming at me saying, well, they're folkish and they give money to the AFA and they do this sort of thing. I didn't know that. Why didn't I know that? Because I don't generally buy the newer titles. I buy the older stuff. I buy them at used bookstores and old titles. I don't know how long it had been since I'd bought a book that was, newer than 1965 or something. Especially the New Age type stuff. I tend to steer away from that because you never know what the author was into. So I bought the books because I wanted to look at these little pocket Havamals because I working with some military kindreds and I thought it might be a good thing to stock. Now I have to take that back, and I don't even know how to correct that problem other than deleting the podcast. But everything else in the podcast is worth keeping. But it puts a nickel in the pocketbook of those people, and I don't like that. So maybe we consider this a correction. If you listen to that one, maybe go back to the parts, those Hugen and Mugen ones, those pocket Havamals, Bellows, Bray, and Thorpe. Bellows, Bray, and Thorpe. There's nothing wrong with them. Like, those are old, out of copyright translations of Havamal and Codex Regius or the Seymour Rosetta, and so those are good to have. It's just the publishing company that happens to be making money on them this day and age most likely isn't. I haven't got any confirmation whether or not that's true, but I just throw it out. But that, because I did that, because I recommended that, there are people who will they will read that, they will watch the podcast, they will see 50 titles, and then that one publishing company, and immediately put me in the ballpark with those other people. Now, I'm not going to go jumping ship. I'll deal with it. But a lot of new people, new to the religion, won't know where to go. So maybe we have a little compassion, a little tolerance. We take a little easier on those people, because we're going to drive them right into the hands of all these racist factions, and that's why they're growing, and all we're doing is fighting each other. Maybe we just have a little tolerance. We preach tolerance, right? We preach acceptance. Accept me for who I am, how I identify. We preach that, but then we don't do that. So we should probably do better across the board when it comes to Asatru, Norse pagans, Norse heathens. The only way that we can get rid of the hate in our community is by education. We can take that person aside and we can be like, "Where'd you get that book?" "Oh, I got it on Amazon." That. Let me tell you a little history on that publishing company. Or, "Where did you get that hammer?" "Oh, you got it from that catalog." Let me see the catalog, and I'll show you a few things to look out for and a couple of names to look out for maybe in the future. That sort of a thing. Help them understand that there are good and bad sides to this, and just don't shove them off to the bad side because they made a mistake. So compassion all the way around. Let's do that for our fellow Asatru, so we can build, so we can get strong, so we can have hofs, so we can do these things. We can come together and support one another. And I think you'll find that if you come to my Discord, you'll see we have every classification of human being that you could imagine is on my Discord in a very small space, and we all get along. I very, very rarely have to deal with any sort of an out of line situation. Everybody they agree to disagree sometimes, and but oftentimes it's just an open, honest discussion between adults, and that's the way I wish that the community at large could mimic the way that our Discord is run. And I don't run it. I just established the rules and let people go. And ultimately, I think that it's just by the example that myself and the other leadership on the board, by the example that we have, by not stirring stuff up, and we're not posting memes, and nobody cares about that. Nobody's learning from a meme. But I think that's really where the learning occurs, and what we're doing is we're taking people and we're educating them, and we're inoculating them against the hateful groups, because now they're going to learn the dog whistles, and they're going to learn who to avoid. Nobody's perfect. I mean, I tripped over it on this other podcast. So everybody makes mistakes, but they don't deserve to be burned alive for it. They deserve to be educated with a little bit of compassion and a little bit of heart, and that's the way we play it on our Discord. Because I'm going to talk about a couple of problems in our community. Some of those problems are the grandstanders. Now, the grandstanders, they just kind of, I don't know, they just kind of fall onto a topic and make that their whole identity. And in a lot of cases, I see that. I don't see someone who venerates the gods or does their thing. I see a combatant. And I guess the world needs those. But when you are a hammer, every problem is a nail. And that's not necessarily the way that's not the way that we can handle our people. And I've been guilty of it too, especially since we kind of started the Northwoods Kindred, I guess for lack of a better word, outreach with our YouTube channel and our TikTok last year. I've fallen into that trap a few times. I've had more than a couple angry rants. But I learned, I won't say I learned my lesson permanently, but I did learn that anger doesn't age well. A rant, an argument, those things don't age well on social media. Inside of a couple of hours, you look like a fool, and inside of a couple of days, you look like a clown, complete and total. So on both sides of those arguments. So I've refrained from it anymore, and anybody that insists on arguing, I just block them, because I don't want to see their content, and I don't want to get in those kind of debates and arguments, because ultimately, how you decide to practice does not affect me. So I've had to kind of reevaluate my position on everything too. I've got some strong ideas about Asatru and how it should be practiced and how these things should be done. But at the end of the day, the only ones that really affect me are the way I practice, and then the way that I communicate with and work with my own kindreds. And other than that, anybody out there can do whatever they want. And and you can call it whatever you want. I would like that we could kind of get on the same page and we could understand a kindred is a kindred, a group is a group, or a collective or a coven, and just kind of not use some words to describe things that they aren't, because it's not because I have some ideal definition of it, but because it's confusing. It confuses the landscape for people, and I've seen meetup groups in the park called a kindred when they don't even know anybody in the group. Like they're just meeting for the first time and they call themselves a kindred. I've seen established kindreds calling themselves something else when they're obviously a great example of a kindred. I've seen online groups, Facebook groups calling themselves a kindred, Discords calling themselves a kindred, because they don't really understand what the word means. And if we just call every group of 2 or more Asatru a kindred, we really don't use the word the way that we should. And the word, at least kin or kinfolk, goes all the way back to the Icelandic sagas. Those are phrases that they use often. So they are traditional words to describe people who are close to one another. Certainly somebody wouldn't call someone kin in that day and age if they never met them before. So I would like to see, not dogma, but I would like to see some sort of a structure or some sort of, get us all on pretty much the same page. But we're never going to get there if we don't have tolerance for individuality in the way that each other likes to practice or likes to do things. I really love it on my Discord because I can show, somebody's like, hey, Goli Budvar, how do you do this thing? And I'll be like, well, here's 2 videos and this is the way we do it and why. And they're like, oh, cool. And then they go do it and they show me a video or pictures or something. They're like, oh, we did it this way because it made sense. And I'm like, oh, that looks awesome. I'm so glad that you guys took it and made it your own and didn't just try to dogmatically do what I do. So that really does feel special to me. It's not something that ticks me off at all. Like some people, they're like, I know that you do it this way, and I just want to explain that the way we did this. And I'm like, no, man, you haven't got to explain nothing to me. Like you did it your way, and that's perfect. I'm doing it my way. I'm not doing it the way I was taught. I've taken what I learned and I evolved it to meet my own practice and my belief system. And even then, my practice has changed and evolved over the years as well. I expect everyone's will. It kind of goes with those grandstanders as the hate breeders. There's a little bit different because the grandstanders see everything as a nail and smash it with a hammer. The hate breeders are just inciting trouble to incite trouble. Like there's no reason why some 1488 clown on TikTok would go to an eclectic Wicca Asatru mix page and start harassing them about the way they use the runes like a tarot card. Like, what business is that of anybody? So those people I like to refer to as the hate breeders, because all they do is they look around and they get some sick joy out of just finding something wrong with somebody and trashing them. I was a victim of some of this mindset by seeing things that I didn't agree with and lashing out at people. I've since grown, so I learned from my immaturity. Doesn't mean I was wrong. Doesn't mean they were wrong. It just means that the way that I approached it was a learning point for me. So I'm fortunate that I have a background as a Marine sniper. I have a tendency to always evaluate things that didn't go right. When things go right, that's fine. Okay, everything was good. I keep moving. But whenever things fall apart or don't go right, I will really, really tear it down to the nuts and bolts and figure out at what stage did I make this go wrong? Because, of course, if I'm involved in it, then I'm involved in it. So at some point, if everything fell apart, I have some culpability in that. So I have a tendency to always overanalyze failures and figure out where did I go wrong and what can I do better next time. And as far as social media goes, I go wrong when I go rant over essentially something that doesn't make a difference to me. So now if I really disagree with somebody, the most I'll do is give them a thumbs down. Or, in a lot of cases, I just won't give them a heart when I give everybody else a heart. That's about my biggest protest because it really doesn't matter. And I don't understand some people that they pretty much get off on making people feel lousy, and I can't get behind that. So those are the hate breeders. And then we have the Plagens and the Asatru. I'm going to just kind of lump them together because I want to burn through it. They are not wholly bad, and a lot of them will stick around and they'll learn and they'll become a part of our community. They will, eventually. Some of them, and some won't. But if it's about if they want you to, in a sense, worship their character, they're probably Plagens or Asatru. If they're always in costume, now I don't have a problem with costume. Like, we dress for ritual occasionally. I'm getting ready to go into doing some sort of homeschool videos, teaching the lore and things like that to children. I will do that in costume because it's exciting for children, and I don't have a problem with costumes. I have a problem when the costume is the character, and the character isn't true to the faith. But again, it's not my problem to call out, so I don't do it. I don't call it out. I just don't follow those people. Just swipe on. Man, there's a lot that we could do. If we could just swipe and just ignore it, that's fine. But don't think for a second that I'm saying ignore blatant racism. If it's there, if it's in your face, confront it, and deal with it, and we'll gang up on it, and we'll push it off of our platforms. But we have to have some compassion on people that don't necessarily mean that. They just don't know. Let's find out if it's ignorance or malice before we go on the attack. That would be a really big step forward, I think, for our whole community. And then the last one is scammers. Like, there's people out here, they buy some junk jewelry on Alibaba or something and sell it for 20, 30 times what it's worth, or run these scam training programs, and they don't give you anything. They take your money, or they coax you into this paywall where you got to get through some stuff. Like, there's a lot of that. So, and I don't have a problem with people getting paid for their efforts. I don't. I don't. I do all this stuff for free, really. But I don't have a problem when people put an effort forth and get paid for it. Of course, you should get paid for it. You should get some compensation for the effort that you put forth. But you should also provide an equal amount of value. And if you're making a living on the Asatru community by either teaching a course or certifying or doing something like that, you damn well should be part of the community. It shouldn't just be fun and games. It shouldn't just be dress up and make believe and then scam a bunch of people, pad your wallet, and then not care about the community because, they're only there as a cash cow for you. Those scammer people, call them out when you see them, because they're not doing the community any good either. And they're there. I won't name any, but they're there. And so, as I said before, Christianity is declining, and our pagan ways are really on the rise across America, at least. But what we haven't seen is our way enter into the political spectrum yet. So the only way that we're going to be able to get a foothold and get, build our own temples and have our clergy and have, clergy training programs that are, a little bit more diverse than a one-on-one mentorship program like I learned through, and my mentor learned through, and his mentor learned through, and and I'm mentoring a couple of other people, but that's not a very wide tree. It'd be really nice to have a program that would mentor. And there's been a few have come along the way, and some of those other groups that I mentioned previously have had or do have clergy training programs, but you got to be in that. You got to be a part of that, which it's not and in some cases it's a bad thing. Like, obviously with the ones I mentioned earlier, it's not a good thing to go join them just so you can get a certificate that says you're a Goli or a Wola or whatever. So it would be nice if we could, as a community, as inclusive as we are, establish our own way. But the problem is nobody wants to be trained. And this is kind of a sticking point that we have. Like, no Catholic priest is ever going to be like, oh yeah, I shouldn't have went to the thing and got trained. But every one of them will administer their sermons and everything in a different way, commensurate with their personality, their style of teaching. I think there was a movie, I think it was called Father Joe or something like that. It's about this old guy who was a boxer, and he went to California and he became a Catholic priest, and then he died of some weird disease. Really, really good movie. Of course, it's about Christianity, so there's a lot of Jesus-y stuff in there. But it's a good movie if you watch it, because what it shows is that, multiple clergymen can go through the exact same training, but how they administer to their people is completely a reflection of their life, their personality, and their own, strong points and weak points. Perfect example of that. And we could have that too. We could train together on the basics, the things that are indisputable, the lore, the stuff that's recorded, and we can debate, how true is the sagas of the Icelanders, but we can debate those in an intelligent and an articulate way. Not, oh, you follow that, you're garbage, that's all crap. Why can't we just sit down and talk about it? If we could train our clergy like that, and then the clergy is free to take that training and go out and administer it in whatever way suits their personality and their own personal practice best. If we could do that, we would be far ahead of everyone else. But right now, if we can't do that, if we can't actually become legitimate, that's why all those surveys I read, they always talked about the decline of Christianity, and it would give, 15, 20 different sects of Christianity and Muslims and Abrahamic faiths, and then it would just be like pagan. Most of them didn't even say pagan. Agnostic was probably the only one that they really mentioned very much, or atheist. And I find it hard to believe that of all the people they interviewed to do these surveys, they didn't come across a single Wicca, Asatru, Druid, or any other eclectic pagans along the way. I find that very hard to believe. But since we're not organized, and we don't have clergy, and we don't have training programs, we're looked at as just like this sort of a fringe, childish thing that people will grow out of eventually. But you'll see, bounce around on TikTok for a minute, you'll see that there are a fair amount of radical Christians on there that prove the point that they're losing their people. Like, what would make a pastor start getting angry and mad and super, super, combative against pagans? He's certainly not attending to his flock. In a situation like that, the only way is because his flock is flying the coop, right? They're all going to do something else. Like, I would say that in, that Pastor Greg Locke, cream puff, like that dude, probably the reason he hates witches so much is because he's probably had a dozen or more people out of his flock take off and find those ways, those pathways, and which loses revenue. If you're not there, you're not putting money in his collection jar, and you're not paying for his Cadillac. So there's been a big kind of a resurgence or an insurgence, I guess, of kind of like combative pastors, on TikTok. And I'm sure I haven't even seen the tip of the iceberg because I stay away from that side of TikTok as much as I can. But sometimes it comes across my feed. So you know what I'm talking about. But we don't have that. We don't have anything like that. You get somebody claims they're a Gothi, someone says they're a Gothi, you can't really dispute it, you can't really confirm it, you really don't know. You can only tell by maybe their actions, their deeds, the effort that they put in, and the message that they sell, and then the message that they're giving in the way that they're working with people. That's really the only criteria we have. If you were to ask 20 people what makes a good Gothi, they'd probably have 20 different opinions. I know a lot of people have told me I'm a shitty Gothi because we had a disagreement over a personality or a just an idea, which really isn't relevant. So without that coming together and without having that established sort of a program, we have no congressmen. We have no representatives in the House. We have no major politicians. I don't know of any mayors or governors. Now, that doesn't mean they're not out there, but the way our political landscape is, if there was a Wicca, a sitting congresswoman or congressman that was Wicca or a Norse pagan, I think we'd probably hear about it. I'm sure Tucker would lose his shit over it. He would have to say something. So I think that would probably come out, that we would have those people in an elected office, but I haven't seen that yet. So maybe there is, but it's certainly not a prominent thing. But we should have more of that. We should be represented because we're being represented. These are our representatives. These people are going to Congress and they're going to D.C. to represent us and our needs as well. We are the religious minority, but we still deserve representation. And if we can get organized, at least we can have a collective of Gothi. Maybe they don't all agree. Maybe some of them are folkish, and some of them are universalists, and some of them are tribalists, but a collection of Gothi who, while they disagree fundamentally on the core belief systems, they can still agree that we require some representation, and we could come together for that. Because, I mean, as much as a universalist would disagree with a folkish or a vokish, and I'm just going to throw the vokish out. Like, we don't even need those guys at all. Like, they can just go away. But as much as as a universalist would disagree with a focused, we have the same level of disagreement between the left and the right, between the rich and the poor, between the black and the white. Those same levels of disagreement, and both sides, hear me in this and take this to heart. Both sides know they are right. So understand that. The vokish know they are right. The folkish know they are right. The universalists know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that they are right. The tribalists know that that's the only way. It's just how people are. You get your beliefs are patterned after your life, and your failures and your losses and your gains and your triumphs, and that patterns your life, and everybody's is different. So we all come to these different conclusions, but we know that we are right for us. The problem is when what is right for me gets pushed on you, it's never a good fit. And that's the real problem that we have. But if we can just agree that what's right for me is right for me, and what's right for you is right for you, and we can come together and we can support each other in what is right for each other, even if it's not right for the other one, we can do that. And I am in no way telling you to support those racist bastards, okay? No way at all. That has nothing to do with this conversation. This conversation is really about understanding that everybody is different and everybody has a different belief system. And now, kind of the last thing, I don't want to get too deep. I have a few other things we can do, but kind of one of the last ones I want to get into is the new breed of Asatru that are coming here, because they're coming from, in a lot of cases, a very zealot household. At least a lot of the younger guys I've talked to are new, and they're coming from Catholic households and like wooden spoon households. They bring some of that stuff into our path, and I see it. This is probably the best example I can give, is how they bring that Christianity into ours. Is some people tend to come in to the path and they venerate only one God. They will pick a God. Like, I've been in the path for 3 months and I haven't picked my deity yet. Well, you don't have to pick a deity. You can pick a deity for this job and then one for that job, and we have a whole plethora. You don't have to stay with one. You can pick them all. But that's not the worst part of it. The worst part is so I will talk to people here and there, and of course, inevitably, eventually, if you're here, you probably already know, but it will come out that I don't venerate Loki. And I have my own reasons for that, and I've articulated them multiple times, but I just don't venerate Loki or his kin, without very few exceptions. There would be very few exceptions as to when I would do that. And that's my belief, and that's my way, and that's fine, and I don't have to explain it to anybody. But I might even get hate on this podcast, because somebody's going to come up and they're going to dive into, they're going to throw out the old Lokasana. You can't offer to Odin if you don't offer to Loki. Loki is responsible for all the tools of the gods. Loki's just a trickster. He doesn't actually do anything evil. Loki's children are important to the story. And so I understand all of that. Just don't venerate him. And I shouldn't have to. And I shouldn't. And the problem is that when those arguments don't convince me, it becomes combative. And I don't understand that. Like, why do you care who I pour meat out on the ground to? Meat that I brewed, I had a ritual, I pour meat out, and I don't pour meat out to this one deity that is very, very much akin to the Christian mindset of, you won't take Jesus as your savior, well, you're going to hell. Well, that's cool, I'm cool with hell, I'll just go there, and hang out with my family. Like, where else am I going to go? And they're like, you don't understand. Well, I do understand. You don't understand. And we can have that argument, but they're so steadfast and that they are right and you are wrong and there's no way around it, and they just try to convince you. And I get that. I get that mostly with the Lokians, but and I'll give you an example, is because everybody can probably see how that pans out all the time. If I just, without saying anything negative, because I haven't said anything negative against Loki other than the fact that I don't venerate him, that And then it always turns into that argument, and then I end up being an asshole, and everything's wrong with everything I do because I don't do that, and I don't honor all the Norse pantheon instead of just the one. But then I turn around and I'm like, they only honor the one, and it's very strange, and I don't really have a lot of tolerance for it anymore. But it's part of the landscape now, and it's very Christian in its origins. It's kind of like. And I don't hold it against them. I don't, because I know what it is they came from an environment where it's, it's my way or the highway. It's Jesus or you're going to hell. And then they come into this and they're like, well, I picked my deity. My deity's Loki. He's the one that brought me here, and it's Loki or you're going to hell. Cool. Like, I'm good with that. But all you can do is argue the point, and it doesn't make a difference in anyone's practice. And the reason I use Loki as an example is not to fire him up, but I'm probably going to do that anyway, even though I've still never said anything negative about Loki. But if I were to say I don't venerate Tyr because, whatever reason, I don't venerate Tyr because I venerate Fenrir and Fenrir or Tyr bound him. I don't, but you get the point. So if I said that, people were going to be like, oh, okay, well, it's on you, man. Probably not a good decision, but whatever, that's your decision to make. If I say, I don't venerate Frigga because I think Frigga and Freya are the same, so I only venerate Freya, people will be like, well, that's not how I look at it, but you're free to do whatever you want. So it really doesn't matter what you do, or I can be like, I don't venerate Aegir, or I don't venerate Balder, or whatever. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. They only care if you venerate Loki, and in a lot of cases, his kin. And I think that's weird. Don't you think that's weird? I don't understand it, but, it's not for me to understand. But it is something I have to navigate, and you probably have to navigate it too, unless you're on the other side of that argument. So we'll see. We'll see when my comments blow up. But I think in a lot of cases it's because they're new and they're coming in and they're trying to learn, and they think they're doing well, and they find whatever it is that makes them feel like they're getting connected. And then when you don't do the same, especially someone like I've been on the path for 30 years, so I get a little bit beef when I don't do the same as someone who's been on the path for 2 years, because they feel like my not doing it is challenging their decisions, or challenging, in a lot of cases, who they are, because they're identifying so strongly with the path and the particular deity that they chose. And if you don't do that, it almost feels like it's an attack, a personal attack on them. Like, oh, you don't venerate Loki? What's wrong with Loki? I venerate Loki. Loki's my bro. Da 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 da. I offer to him, and he doesn't do, and da da da. And it just goes on, and it's like, dude, I'm not trying to start an argument with you. Like, you can do whatever you want. I'll show you how to do it. I just don't do it. We have to be able to accept each other like that. And if we can't accept something that small about each other, how are we really going to start accepting the big stuff and start building our community around what we have in common, and less around who we hate in common? Because that really seems to be the only real common thread we have in the community, is that we hate those people, right? And then whoever those people is, it grows and shrinks depending on who you are, because I might hate those people, and those people, and you only hate those people, but you hate those people the most. And it's a really weird thing. So we're really connected. We're really only united in hate. And that's why we're not growing. And let's go all the way back to the early days of Asatru. We'll say mid 80s. Think about mid 80s is when the Asatru Alliance came along. So the Asatru Alliance has been, it's been banging around with the AFA off and on. Like, I don't know what it is with Valgard and McNallen. They got like a weird like bromance thing that's been going on for like 50 years. It's creepy actually if you see those two together. But the Alliance it wasn't like that type of an organization. It was just like an alliance of independent kindreds. And when I first came into Asatru, I was in an alliance kindred, and I learned and I never seen anything racist or separatist at all, which was very weird to me when first time I seen Valgard interacting with McNallen, and I was like, that guy's a racist, right? And he's like, oh, I've known him since the 70s. And okay. But then eventually we had a falling out and we split ways, and I can look at it from a different point of view. And I can see that, like, their catalog has books by either one of them is selling books by the other, and works by other, people that are marginalized or marginal. I mean, like Elsie Christensen and stuff like that. So they're selling all this information, by these other organizations that normal people wouldn't want to support. So I'm glad I've distanced myself from them. But the main point of this is that the Alliance is old. It's been around a long time. And it has 10 kindreds in it, maybe. The numbers go up and down, and some of those kindreds only got 3 people in them, because that's the requirement to get in, is to have three kindred members. So in 30 or 40 years, maybe even longer, and you got 10 kindred, you're doing something wrong. You're not managing this thing correctly. And before I realized that they were so in league with the AFA, I actually, earlier on this year, because I'd been out of public Asatru for a while, I was just kind of doing my own thing with my own kindred. So when I started the YouTube this year, last year, and January 1st of last year, I was like, you know what, I'm going to go back on and I'm going to order the Vortru magazine, because before, in my early days, it was a really cool way to just kind of stay on top of Asatru in general, because it had, articles from around the world, really. And I got one over there with a lengthy article with Svineborn in it, which is, it really has a lot of good information about the beginnings of Asatru and Svineborn's practice. So it had some information. So I thought, well, I'll just get this magazine again and see what's going on. So I buy the magazine, and come December, I'm like, you know what? Those guys took my money and I didn't even get nothing. So I contacted them, and I'm like, hey, man, you took my money. You didn't give me no magazines. So we sorted it out, whatever. Eventually, they ended up sending me 3 magazines in a stupid catalog. And then I go through the catalog, and the catalog's got McNallen books in it, Elsie Christensen books in it, Edred Thorson books in it. So if you don't know, Edred Thorson, actually, his whole catalog, from what I'm told, I mean, I don't have confirmation of this, but, take it with a grain of salt. Edred Thorson is, his catalog is pretty much just funds the AFA. So all the money that comes into that just gets funneled straight to the AFA. And it's kind of, it's not funny, but it just shows how messed up the whole landscape is, because Thorson was a major part of the Troth, maybe even a founder, and then he had the Rune Guild, and then he kind of did that whole left-hand path, Satanist garbage, got booted out of his own Troth. But then even now, the Troth is they're super, super inclusive, and, building more and more every day, and still up until recently, maybe even still, pushing Thorson's books. And besides the fact that he's a flaming racist, the money from his proceeds go to fund the AFA. So in building the Troth larger and pushing these particular pieces of paper, and they're funding their own enemy, not intentionally, but because no one's doing the homework. And it's hard to know who to trust, because you get the combatant ones, and they're like, oh, well, that guy had that thing, and that thing came from the AFA, and that's racist, so stay away from them people. And it's like, whoa, what do you mean? I didn't know where it came from. It's just what was being done. It was in this book I bought, and then, so you pretty much keep kicking people out. Nobody's willing to do the research. They're just on the hunt all the time, forever, and then big things slip through the cracks because they're so nitpicky about the little things, like that guy has a hammer that has the wrong symbol on it or something, and or that guy has a hammer at all, because apparently that's a thing too, that the hammer is insensitive to some people, and maybe that's a topic for a whole nother show. But the basic thing I was getting at was that every difference is not a challenge. Just because we differ in the way that we do things doesn't mean that I'm challenging you or challenging your way of life or challenging your practice or trying to minimize it or denigrate it or anything. It just means that I do things differently based on my life experience. And I've got some life experience that's probably not very similar to most of you. I've 20 years in the Marine Corps, 4 combat tours, 7 overseas deployments, many of that as a sniper, an instructor at some of the most complicated schools in the military arsenal, as well as some mountaineering. And so I've had a different life. And I'm not saying it's greater or less than, but it's different, and it shaped who I am. And that has to be taken into consideration when you're talking to people about their practice. You have to think of the life that shaped them. And it's always better to just dive in and just kind of have a conversation and like, hey, why did you do this? What's your thoughts on this? I don't know how many, like daily, I get either on YouTube or on TikTok, I get a question that says, are you part of the racist Asatru? Are you part of the non-inclusive part of Asatru? What do you think of gays and transgenders in Norse religion? I get these questions daily. Not by people who consume my content and understand exactly where I stand on these issues, but just random people. They just come along and they're like, how do you feel about that? I don't even answer them anymore. And it's partially because I'm just sick of answering the same thing over and over, and partially because you don't deserve an answer. If you were to come out like that, you don't deserve an answer. I shouldn't have to verify myself for every person that comes along. And again, this is just part of my belief. I believe that I shouldn't have to because I wouldn't expect that from someone else. Now, if you are the type of person who leads with that, then you probably do expect that from someone else. It's simply just difference in our backgrounds and the way, because I would never come out and be like, hey, are you part of the racist Asatru? What I would do is if I had a dog whistle or I suspected something, I would go down your wall, I would look at your videos, I would look at your comments, I would look at these kind of things, and I'd be like, okay, this person seems pretty cool. I can absorb their content, or this person is not somebody I want to be associated with, or this person is just a clown. I can determine myself, and then I have been wrong before, and I've also had troubles with people and ended up ultimately at the end of the day becoming friends with them when we finally decided to put aside our petty differences. So, man, if there's only one key takeaway from this podcast, it's that. Let's put aside our differences and let's err on the side of compassion for one another, because we are all we have. We have no representation. We have no organization. All we have is our gods and each other. And if we can't come together and just forget about the little things and focus on the big things, then we're going to keep driving every other new pagan into the hands of the racist organizations, and we're never going to have any growth, and we're never have any organization, and we'll always be a joke to those on the outside looking in. So if I had any one key takeaway, it would be that one. Other than that, engage with our content on all platforms. Our link is in our link tree to everything that we have. Engage with us there. Join our Discord and engage with us there for sure. You'll get more out of Discord if you put more into it. It's going to be fantastic. And share our information. Point your friends and family here. We are nothing to be feared in this community. We're just trying to paint those lines down the road so everybody can stay in their own lane and run what they brung. You can be hauling down the road in a Ferrari or a jalopy. We don't really care. We don't care what your special flavor of Asatru is. We only care that we can support that for you. And if you want to help us out, I told you how to do that. That's fantastic. Thanks for hanging out with us. I hope to see you next week here. This is the Northwoods Kindred Podcast. I am Bodvar, the chieftain and Gothi of the Northwoods Kindred, and I'll see you next week. Thor Vigi, my friends.